Hey everyone, I am so thrilled to have you here for today's explainer. If you're someone who loves breaking down complex, heavy ideas into clear, actionable insights, you are in exactly the right place. Today, we're diving into a really fascinating piece of source material. It's a July 29th devotional analysis by Pastor Hugh Zakiang, and it builds on the writings of John MacArthur regarding the book of Matthew, specifically chapter 6. We're going to go on a deep dive into the human psyche, theology, and the incredible, literal weight of holding on to a grudge. All right, let's just jump right in with a fundamental question. Have you ever wondered why it is so exhausting to hold a grudge? Seriously, I want you to really ponder that as we go through this explainer. Pastor Hugh does something incredibly interesting here. He takes the dense theology of forgiveness and he connects it directly to our everyday psychological burdens. You know, we've all been wronged, and we all know that heavy, draining feeling of resentment. So today, we're going to map out exactly why that exhaustion happens, and more importantly, the massive paradigm shift required to finally let it go. Part 1. The mandate to forgive. So the crucial point the source material establishes right off the bat is an absolute baseline rule for this entire analysis. It frames forgiveness not just as, a nice idea, but as a foundational duty. Drawing on references from Ephesians and Romans, the core argument is that believers must forgive others because they have already been entirely forgiven by God. Now, the author acknowledges that human nature fiercely resists this duty. Our flesh, our instincts, they immediately want justice, or, let's be honest, maybe even revenge. But the analysis points out that embracing this mandate is absolutely essential, not just for your own individual peace, but for the effectiveness and the unity of an entire community or church. To back this up, the devotional brings in some ancient wisdom. A person's wisdom yields patience. It is to one's glory to overlook an offense. That's from Proverbs 19:11. What's happening here is a total reframing of how we view tolerance. Think about it. Society usually tells us that overlooking an offense makes you a pushover, right? Like it makes you weak. But Pastor Hugh uses this proverb to argue the exact opposite. Forgiveness is actually framed here as humanity's absolute highest virtue. It is your glory to let it go. And this idea is pushed even further by a really powerful historical quote from the Puritan writer Thomas Manton. He wrote, "Only those who receive mercy treat others with such tenderness, because they know with what tenderness God has treated them." The devotional uses this to explain that humans are, generally pretty bad at generating authentic tenderness entirely on our own. The only way we can genuinely extend that deep, patient mercy to others is by deeply understanding and reflecting the mercy we've already received. It's basically a chain reaction of grace. Moving on to part 2, the illusion of control. Okay, so forgiveness is this glorious high ground. Why is it so incredibly hard to actually do? Well, the primary roadblock is our own human pride. Pastor Hutt argues that from our flawed, subjective perspective, we almost always cast ourselves as the hero of our own story. We tell ourselves, I am 100% the victim here, it's entirely their fault, and therefore, I hold the ultimate power and authority to decide if they get my forgiveness. But the text contrasts this with the spiritual reality. In pretty much any conflict, it is incredibly rare for one person to be entirely faultless. We are all flawed. So clinging to that ultimate authority and withholding forgiveness, according to this analysis, it isn't empowering at all. It's actually a sin and an act of extreme arrogance. Which brings us to part 3, the prison of bitterness. So what exactly happens when we refuse to let go of that arrogance? We build what the sermon defines as a mental prison, or xin lao in Chinese. And this isn't just a metaphor. It's described as a self-imposed state of exhaustion and spiritual decay caused directly by holding on to resentment. The text explains that harboring a grudge completely isolates you. You might think you're punishing the person who wronged you, but in reality, you are the one sitting in the cell. Furthermore, the analysis warns that this attitude actually invites divine discipline, exactly like any other wrongdoing would. Pastor Hun systematically breaks down the real-world toll of unforgiveness, and it's pretty brutal. First, it actively drains your mental and emotional energy. Instead of living your life, your mind is just constantly consumed by the offense. Second, it causes literal sleepless nights, tossing and turning, planning how to get even. Third, it forces you to hyperfixate on the faults of others. You might take a perfectly fine colleague and suddenly start looking for every little tiny mistake they make just to tear them down. And finally, the most dangerous part of all, it slowly turns you into a bitter, mean-spirited person. The absolute tragedy here is that this degradation of your character happens so quietly, you don't even realize you've changed. But trust me, everyone around you absolutely feels it. Now for part 4, the French fry incident. Yes, you heard that right. Now, what's really interesting about this next part is how Pastor Hugh completely shatters that illusion of human arrogance we were just talking about. And he does it with this brilliant, kind of hilarious metaphor. Imagine a businessman sitting in an airport lounge. Minute 0. He sits down, opens his newspaper, and starts eating his French fries. Minute 2, a stranger, who the businessman judges as perhaps a bit unrefined, sits down right next to him and casually starts eating from the pile of fries between them. No way, right? Minute 10, the businessman is absolutely seething in silent, judgmental anger. How dare this guy eat my food, he's thinking. Minute 15, the stranger, completely unfazed, smiles peacefully at the angry businessman and just walks away. Then comes the twist at minute 16. The businessman moves his newspaper to pack up, and sitting right underneath it is his own completely untouched order of French fries. He had been eating the stranger's fries the entire time. Just let that sink in for a second. We so often feel like our rights are being violated. We sit there in self-righteous anger, judging the people around us. Yet, just like the businessman, we might actually be the ones actively relying on the quiet grace of others. How often are we the ones basically eating someone else's fries? How often are our friends, our neighbors, or our colleagues silently tolerating our flaws, our mistakes, and our bad days with a peaceful smile, while we just sit there remaining completely oblivious and arrogant? It's a profound realization that the devotional uses to really humble us. And finally, part 5, extending grace to others. So how do we take this huge paradigm shift and apply it to the messy reality of our daily relationships? The author gives us a clear 3-step roadmap. Step 1, recognize our own flaws. We have to admit that we're weak and we are constantly relying on the grace of both God and the people around us. Step 2, let go of that subjective pride. We have to drop the illusion that we are the ultimate victims who hold the power to punish everyone else. And step 3, because we are loved and forgiven despite our own massive shortcomings, we must extend that same broad, generous forgiveness outward. And the text specifically challenges us to extend this not just to our close friends, but to our difficult colleagues, those annoying neighbors, and even people we might actively dislike. I'm going to wrap up our explainer today by leaving you with this final, incredibly provocative question derived directly from Pastor Hugh's message. Are you holding a grudge while eating someone else's fries? Take a really hard look at the relationships in your life where you feel wronged right now. Is it possible that you are blinding yourself to your own faults? Who is extending grace to you right now? And who do you need to finally forgive today? Think about it, let it challenge you, and use this framework to step out of that mental prison for good. Thank you so much for joining me for this deep dive, and I highly encourage you to keep seeking out knowledge that transforms how you see the world. See you next time.